Okay, I've been informed that the elder that's doing the opening prayer from Sioux Valley Dakota Nation has yet to arrive. We're expecting her shortly. While I check in, everybody over here is ready to go. You guys are good? Audio level's fine? Okay, terrific. So, pending the arrival of the elder, we'll get underway very shortly. Well, while I'm here, just a couple of housekeeping things. There is water and coffee available. It's very humid today. Please don't be shy. Keep well hydrated. We have some small finger foods available, of course, if you didn't have a chance to grab lunch. Everybody's welcome. The washrooms are around the corner and past the first cafeteria there and down the hallway, and they'll be on your left. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the setup of the hotel. So a few more minutes and we'll get underway.
I'm going to read them, direct them. I'm just nervous. I'm just shaking.
Okay, I'm informed that they just pulled up to the front of the hotel, so we're literally moments from beginning. So as a matter of housekeeping, just to our assembled media, we're going to have an opening prayer from Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Elder Jesse Chaskey, and we're going to be presenting a with tobacco. That'll be done by MKO's Megan Corshane. And we'll begin the press conference, and the order of speakers are Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Chief Jennifer Bone, to be followed by Manitoba Kawenawe Ogamakana Grand Chief Garrison Settee, God's Lake First Nation Chief Hubert Watt, Norway House Cree Nation Councillor Dave Swanson, and Pimachikamak Cree Nation Councillor Donnie McKay. And then we'll be asking the elder to offer an opening prayer. To our assembled journalists, we are going to accommodate one-on-one interviews following the media conference. So if you want one-on-ones, please come and see me, and we will accommodate you. That's important, and we thank you for being here. Okay, our elder has arrived. We're gonna let her come up and say a prayer. One more thing before we get underway. Can we humbly ask that you mute or silence your communication devices, iPhones, Android phones, Blackberries if you still have them, Trios. All right, I'm going to check in with our friends from Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. Are we ready to go with the live stream? Okay, we're live? Terrific, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to our media conference on the unmarked burial sites near Brandon, Manitoba. We have a conglomerate of speakers, and I've already let the people here know what they are, but I'm going to repeat it for the people watching on social media. First off, we're going to have Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Chief Jennifer Bone speak, followed by MKO Grand Chief Garrison Settee, God's Lake First Nation Chief Hubert Watt, Norway House Cree Nation Councillor Dave Swanson, Pimachikamak Cree Nation Councillor Donnie McKay will route out people who are speaking, and we're going to be asking our elder, Sioux Valley Dakota Nation elder Jesse Chaskey, to get us underway. After the assembled speakers, we're going to end off. We're going to ask the elder to our elder to offer a closing prayer. After which we're going to be accommodating one-on-one interviews. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce MKO's Megan Corshane. She's the manager of our IRS unit, as well as Sioux Valley Dakota Nation elder Jesse Chaskey. Ladies.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've been asked to say the opening prayer, so I'm going to say my prayer in my own language. Ateo kantaka, apetu de kura heitrega, tiwa heider wawinakab, itanchanga de omo hiotakapi, unataku kuyohadakap, taku tokarodakap, Nani etu kashira wachiuni api, oyaki apte, woyaksha, wotachi, the no yakopte. Kao, umanichi oji washte unhapta, ayahechi ochikichichi. Unshuda kab, unshikapetu kashira. Mitaku obu yushke tehonikte, amitaku was.
We'd like to thank our elder Chaskey for the opening prayer. Up first, first speaker today is Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Chief Jennifer Bone.
Hamitakiapi, Oyate Wachiapi wi, Imakiapi, Wipazoka Wakpa Oyanke, Hechitawahi. Good afternoon, relatives and friends. My name is Chief Jennifer Bone of Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. First off, I want to say thank you to Elder Jesse Chaskey for the beautiful opening prayer this afternoon and setting the tone of healing, reconciliation, and a better future for our next generation. I would like to begin by acknowledging my ancestors, my grandparents, and my parents, the late Chief Robert Bone and Brenda Bone, who are both survivors of residential schools, as well as all the children who were forcibly removed from their families and those who never made it back home. We gather here today because of the injustices we suffered in the past and those that we still experience today. We are committed to uncovering the truths of how our Dakota Oyate and our fellow nations were forcibly put into colonial institutions and subjected to genocidal policies by the Government of Canada. For many families and communities whose children were stolen from them, many were never returned home, even upon their death. In Manitoba, the tragic reality is worsened by a lack of enforceable provincial legislation to protect the burial grounds of our stolen children. Our request is reasonable. We simply ask that the province of Manitoba use existing legislation to provide all Manitobans, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, the confidence that the resting places of their departed loved ones will be taken care of and protected forever. Our nation's work on finding our missing children began in 2012 by Chief Vincent Tatchin and Council with Catherine Nichols. Today, under the guidance of our elders, we continue to investigate what happened to our missing loved ones. The Brandon Residential School was located near our community and operated for 77 years from 1895 to 1972. Children from over 100 First Nations, including Métis and Inuit children, were forcibly brought here. Many of them perished, and for reasons unknown, they were not brought home for proper burial in their communities. For many years now, we have been actively searching for cemeteries and unmarked graves associated with this institution to eventually locate our missing children and reconnect families. In our investigation, we have used survivor accounts, archival documents, archaeological methods, and geophysical technologies to identify 2 cemeteries. One is located in Turtle Crossing Campground, and the second is on land owned by the Brandon Research Center. We have also identified a possible 3rd burial ground on a portion of the school property that we currently own. To date, we have located 104 potential graves, and the names of 98 children are accountable through death records. The fence and memorial cairn marking the children's cemetery at Turtle Crossing Campground were removed in the mid-2000s, and their graves have been repeatedly disturbed and damaged by developers since the 1920s. Negotiations with the landowner and the government of Manitoba to find and protect the cemetery have been long and complicated, although our requests have been simple and straightforward. Since 2012, there have been many barriers to simply accessing private land for initial investigation and ceremonial purposes. With the support of archival documents and survivor testimony, we, Sioux Valley Dakota Oyate, have been asking the government of Manitoba to provide protection for the burials of Indigenous children since 2016. For whatever reason, our request for support was declined, despite the Truth and Reconciliation Commission publishing their 94 calls to action. Specifically, number 75 calls on all levels of government to support the protection of residential school cemeteries and burials. In 2018, land development plans at the Turtle Crossing Campground prompted a geophysical survey, which confirmed the cemetery location and identified 56 potential graves in 4 camping bays. Despite this confirmation almost 5 years ago, action towards protecting the children's graves has been incredibly slow. The government of Manitoba recognized that this geophysical survey was unable to find the boundaries of the cemetery due to various physical obstructions. In order to have a protective fence built, Manitoba required that a second survey be done to find the boundaries, otherwise a standard 50-meter buffer zone would be used. In 2020, a variance order from the City of Brandon required that a fence be put up with assistance from a surveyor and archaeologist, and that the cemetery be identified as the Brandon Indian Residential School grave site. Since that time, Sioux Valley Dakota Oyate has faced many barriers trying to get a second survey done and a temporary fence erected. The Manitoba government has been well aware of Sioux Valley Dakota Oyate's advocation for the protection of the children's cemeteries in numerous nation-to-nation meetings with public statements calling for provincial support. For example, in our media statement after Tecumseh's announcement in June of 2021, I called on Manitoba to develop a centralized and public cemetery database and registry and enact legislation to protect all residential school cemeteries. 1 year later, in June of 2022, I called on Manitoba to address outdated legislation and develop policies to support the protection of cemeteries held on private lands. 3 months later, on September 30th, 2022, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, our nation held a peaceful protest as a result of access being revoked yet again to the cemetery site on private land. At that time, I called on Manitoba to provide support and ensure protection of the children's cemetery. Since then, Sioux Valley Dakota Oyate, with the political support of MKO, wrote to provincial ministers asking for active support. In May of 2023, I called on Manitoba to designate the Children's Cemetery as a provincial heritage site, and following this designation to work with our nation, MKO, and affected communities to develop an agreement that adapts the Heritage Resources Act to the Brandon Indian Residential School burial site. The Children's Cemetery has yet to receive provincial protection, and this is 2 years after the Kamloops announcement, and that is what brings us all here today, where again I am calling on Manitoba to take responsibility for their legislation as it specifically applies to the protection of human remains in this province, and to move forward with the solutions being jointly proposed by Sioux Valley Dakota Nation and MKO. In her interim report, the special interlocutor Kimberly Murray said that Canadians cannot take pride in a country that permits the burials of children to be violently disrespected, and that governments can no longer be bystanders in reconciliation. This is not an isolated issue. Manitoban cemeteries are also at risk. In recent years, journalists have reported about vulnerable, inaccessible pioneer cemeteries and even a registered Mennonite cemetery in deteriorating condition. At the center of these issues is the province of Manitoba's refusal to deal with private or absentee landowners. The Manitoba government's continued inaction not only results in the mistreatment of human remains and perpetuation of colonial violence, but it also pits landowners against those who seek to protect the cemeteries. Moving forward, we are working to identify the communities with children that may be buried in these cemeteries. Our partnership with MKO has been vital in moving towards connecting communities and families. We need to create safe spaces for families and communities to make decisions on how to continue to search for and honor their children, and we must support them in meaningful ways. It is disheartening to continue to tell these communities about the vulnerable status of their ancestors in this cemetery. We are worried about their well-being, as each delay to protect the cemetery is devastating and brings back a lot of trauma and pain. We want to remember them today, and we pray for them. As elected officials, we are in a position to create real change. Our community is committed to finding our missing children, to the investigation of the cemeteries, and to the protection of unmarked graves at Brandon Indian Residential School. Sioux Valley Dakota Oyate thanks the elders and survivors for their significant efforts to move towards reconciliation. We remain diligent and hopeful in the face of difficulty and uncertainty, that out of these years of darkness, brighter days will come. That is why today is an important step in building the foundation for the reconciliation work that lies ahead, and that is why we are calling on the Government of Manitoba to immediately implement its own principles of the Path to Reconciliation Act that was passed in 2016, and to protect the burials of all the little ones in Brandon, Manitoba, by immediately designating the location as a heritage site under Section 2 of the Heritage Resources Act. Thank you for the opportunity to share on behalf of our investigation and important work that is being done.
Thank you, Chief Bone. Up next, our next speaker will be Manitoba Kiwetnawe Okamakanak Grand Chief Garrison Settee.
Tanse, tute magnitisanak, nuagumaganak, how mitakwepi. There are children from at least MKO, There are children from at least 8 MKO First Nations known or believed to be located at a site that was part of the former Brandon Indian Residential School. These communities are God's Lake First Nation, Norway House Cree Nation, Banibonibi Cree Nation, Pimichikamak Cree Nation, Saisi Dene First Nation, Nisatoyasi Cree Nation, the Northlands Denisolene First Nation, and Sapawtawiak Cree Nation. I have a very deep interest in seeking resolution to something that we've been working on for the last 2 years. At an invitation of the elders of Sioux Valley Dakota Nation, we went there to conduct a ceremony because the burial sites that were found were members of MKO First Nations. And the elder requested that we come there because they figured that somebody from the north should come there to do a ceremony on behalf of these sites that contain the members of our MKO First Nations. At that time, we started approaching Canada and the province to immediately and conclusively protect these sites. And Manitoba and Canada should enter into an agreement between the government and the culturally affiliated First Nations and families to provide certainty, control, and disposition of the children. We have been involved in creating policies, ensuring that the Heritage Resources Protection Agreement that was made by Nissequoias Cree Nation with MKO helping to draft this very important document with traditional lands of Sioux Valley Dakota Nation, because it is consistent to the calls to action number 75 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and also Article 12 of UNDRIP. Today it is unacceptable, inexcusable, that the province has not granted protection to these sites. These sites should be protected with dignity and utmost respect. This has not happened. The children that lay in these sites are members of our families, members of our nations, and for the province not to act is very disrespectful to the legacy of our people. So today we are here to plead and to ask the government in total respect to protect these sites, to protect the sites of our ancestors, our relatives. And if this is not done, we have to act in a way that will preserve these sites. And I think that we have the power and the capability to do so. So I'm thankful to join the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. In solidarity, we stand together to ensure that these sites are protected, and they will be protected. The province and Canada should be shameful. They should be ashamed for not acting on this, because we've been working on this for the last two years. So with that, kinanaskumit now, thank you for coming to listen to our story. Egusani.
We'd like to thank Grand Chief Settee for his words. Our next speaker is God's Lake First Nation Chief Hubert Watt.
Danse. Ketama naskumawag kisyaw, agi pasta na kumangay meaw nisi. Naskumawag na statya kuta mamuit nano, og makanak kunang sunod naskumit no. Abet kita pustuit, kita pustatik. Hubert Watt sninga sumantusay ganis news. Ni musi ni manuta anos kayam yan. Ayo asituta man. Ego piga nama ay giwigit ni ngatik. Ay kumut nga na kuha sa gututa na. Ay wigit tastik. Iwan na musi ni mo yan. Ay kumut na kuha sa gayas. Ay sa pagod ni simina tagiwechik. Atis kipo na matso gante kinahanawag. Ay kuning mga kumawon kay distiganis. Ay misko tastajik unasuna. Anto to stajik unasuna. Tag snot strategy ulit ni Koska na kuha kamagananong. antika Pacific. Sa ka pe mana guys 2000 ai hau o kamaon. Mr. Boy gaya kisia uta si kaya me wat. Ki we got tene gonan utana. Mon magas tau ki absoluta gitiana. Ege nusia te masuhe. Mana kan tau ki ganu gure kuak magan kan te ga Pacific. Ki was yoga ni mutnan wakas. Ispeta hog. Muni mana mi magus skin mi ogut nesik ewani haji ut skin no wi go ahus. Eguma ogmaun. Tones tickets. Towichi wed. State check towichi wed mon nogan. Ya muste moni get go up. Kya bache ge we get anyway. Kya bache ge ni sonat sta ge kais match ge as kais min way. Seman to kais min way. Maga kya bache te gini ponan. Stopo de gi chiga postat na no ho instead ne kwas ka na ite ogate. Istegi is chao ngi tap mana nan ten sunana achmok wisagen tabo yabit iswaswag mamas ka tabo kaisen yabit sa nas kaisen prun kita may goy igani si tuna goy gumaon ay how pechi chao tan istuna suno man tu sa ganus istote pechi Bicara postor aja no, usku nega nega tege, nas kumau. Ego maka wis ni me anes, ego nempi kaya ge bigate na hik kumen lagi semesta haji ko to wah maganan. Negus.
I'd like to thank Chief Watt for his address. Up next we have Norway House Cree Nation, Councillor Dave Swanson.
Danke. Gut, am skat na ani stautanas so va ka beni boyak uta besita swago goge no ago magan nanak. Dave Swanson is Garrison, can say CP was it. Gan Naskamau get there, Kagi Bastida Gomeno. I'd like to acknowledge leaders that are here that we're here with, and thank you to the elder for the opening prayer. I guess for us too, as a nation in our House Cree Nation, we are troubled by what's been happening. At Sioux Valley in request to have this area protected. We certainly are in favor of the province acting and doing some taking the action to necessarily protect this area because it will affect the rest of the areas in the province if it's not protected. We had 2 residential schools in our community of Norway House, and we are in the process of doing some of the work that's been going on in Brandon, and we are fearful as well that at some point, we would like to be able to find out where all our kids went, where all our students went from our community, because we are one of the biggest First Nations in the province. And there has been a number of students that went from Norway House to various parts of the country, and some of them still have not returned. And we know that in Brandon, we do have some students that have been buried there, and we want to make sure that they're being honored. We want to make sure that they're being brought home at some point. And I think it's a tragedy in this country of ours that something like this still happens today. that we still have our governments that are still not sold. They talk a lot about reconciliation. They talk a lot about finding the truth. To them, to the governments that are out there, I'll tell you right now that your actions speak louder than words. And that's for one thing, that we are watching you to see what your actions are, and we support Sioux Valley, Dakota Nation, 100% on behalf of the Northhouse Cree Nation. That we want to do whatever we can to ensure that this is taken care of. Ekusane, kinandas komitina, nuwago magadak. Thank you.
We thank Councillor Swanson for his remarks. Our final speaker at the podium this afternoon is Pimicikamak Cree Nation Councillor Donnie McKay.
Tan sinisagit at tamiskatnan, utagapit ako sinega pepiek, minugutan ni Jogananaga Mamo Pichutanak, Donnie McKay, Garrison Councillor for Executive Council Member for Pimicikamak. And so I want to thank again, as my colleagues, counterparts have said, that we are all in support of Sioux Valley, as well in trying to determine and persuade the governments into having the Turtle Crossing campground as a heritage park for the long lost children that are still out there missing. And these unknown children need some peace and rest within where they are, been buried secretly. This is a tragic mistake by the churches and the government itself at the time. The government once again has failed. Has failed again with their truth and reconciliation. What is the truth behind these unmarked graves? How do we reconcile these unmarked graves? These are our stolen children. These children have been imprisoned illegally. Now, what can the government do in that respect? To recognize and acknowledge the truth and reconciliation recommendations that are in place. That is where the mistake is made again. The promise has been broken again and again. So we cannot quit and get these children everywhere across the country of ours, this great country of ours, supposedly, to revive and find these children so that their spirit can rest. So that their great-grandparents can rest, their families can be assured in peace, in harmony within their spirit and soul, that there are children out there that have been identified. It is disheartening. It is demoralizing that the government cannot do this, to have this land given back to Sioux Valley and to rest our people from our MKO region that are also buried over there. What more can anyone say to that? So, it is sad. Sometimes I'm angry. When the Kamloops situation came about, I was sad. I thought it was buried. when I was a child. I'm a student survivor. I'm a residential school survivor. When the Kamloops thing came about, I thought to myself, what happened back then? You know? So there was some sadness, there was anger, there was anxiety, and depression that came all at once again. It re-traumatized our people. So what is the consequence of that? How do we determine the appropriate measures into trying to get what Sioux Valley is requesting and what our MKO communities expect from this, to identify our people that are out there, that they were, Chief Bones said, our kids were stolen, they were imprisoned, they were railroaded from other communities in the MKO region into the southern cities. So we need to find the truth and reconcile. Usani, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKay. At this time, I'd like to call upon our elder, Jesse Chaskey, to close us off in prayer. And following that, we'll accommodate one-on-one interviews from our friends in the media. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Elder Jesse Chaskey.
I've been asked to say the closing prayer. I'll again say it in my own language. Ihontu kashira. Wanachistera, omanichi happy, ondushtape. Onka isto tiata ki ondap, donka to kashiro chanko, jiwaste, yakopta. Zani oshka, iushke, kihonikta. Katako deri yohada kapea chana, washitruska onshudokava, atako tokano chimena. Yechid wagu apta hechi chichira to kashiro onshudokam onshikape. Mechicha onshikape ega, shicheta dara onshucharaka. Tako tuktovana, vichoyo na apta hecha, ni yechid. Uskampte onkiab. Achiste ochik pe. Mamitake was.
Once again, we'd like to thank Elder Chaskey for the prayer. That concludes our media conference for this afternoon. Anybody wanting one-on-one interviews, please let me know and we're going to attempt to accommodate you. Once again, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you.